Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Afroshowbiz News. My name is Musam Khalipi and today we will take you on an arts and entertainment journey from around the African continent. Now to keep in touch, feel free to email us at afroshowbiznews@sabc.co.za. Also follow us on Twitter, our handle is @AfroShowbizNews. Let's get right to it with today's headlines. We celebrate South Africa's 20 years of freedom through arts. Lupita Nyong'o named the most beautiful in the land. And Durban readies for the MTV Africa Music Awards.
The continent stars are coming out.
Nigerian Afrobeat singer Femi Kuti lost out on a Grammy this year. However, he has been given the Grammy medal for his nomination in the Best World Music Album category.
Femi Kuti has been nominated for 4 Grammys without winning. So for that, the Nigerian has been given a medal by the Grammys. The Nigerian musician is the eldest son of Afrobeat pioneer Fela Kuti. His international career began in 1988 when he was invited by the French Cultural Center in Lagos to perform at the New Morning Club in France and the Murs Festival in Germany. In the early 2000s, Femi collaborated on his album Fight to Win with a number of American musicians, including Common, Mos Def, and Jaguar Wright. Femi has a strong commitment to social and political causes. This year at the Grammys, he lost out to South African Isicathamiya group Lady Smith Black Mambazo.
The girl fine, I mean she's so fine, no. Her body's tight, now wahala.
The dawn of democracy in South Africa brought about lineup changes in the television set programming on the SABC channels, and introduction of soapies in South African indigenous languages were born. Joining us in studio for a discussion on the transformation of these disciplines 20 years into democracy, we are joined in studio by creator of Mubango, Duma Kandlovu. Hello and welcome to Afroshowbiz News.
Hello, good morning.
Thank you for coming. Now, Babu Duma, the country is celebrating 20 years in democracy. Do you think we have a reason to celebrate in the entertainment industry?
Yes, we definitely do. For those of us in television, 20 years marks a major milestone, because if you can go back 20 years before today, there was hardly any programming that could be seen to be accenting and celebrating us as a people. So I think it has been a journey. I think a lot has been achieved, and there still is a lot that needs to be done.
Now, Babu Duma, you introduced the first vendor TV series in South Africa. Tell us why you thought this was important.
20 years ago, I think we used to look at television and not see ourselves and not see us representing in a manner that speaks to us as Abantu Base Africa. And there was a need and there was a gap for Africans to look at themselves the way they understand themselves. So, for instance, there was hardly one program that spoke in the minority languages, whether it was Venda, whether it was Tsonga. I think ama languages were the Nguni languages. So we thought that it was important to also accent those people who had never been portrayed on television. Mubango was created because Venda is the smallest language in South Africa, or let me say, it was the smallest language in South Africa. But because of Mubango, you can hardly even sense the fact that it is still the smallest language, because Mubango has managed to put it at the center stage.
All right. Now, when you were introducing the TV series to the SABC, how difficult was it for them to receive it?
Well, fortunately, at that time, ICASA, which was called the IBA, had insisted that the minority languages have to be given a platform. So when I came with that proposal, Utaningam Simang, who is also Tsonga speaking, basically understood the mandate, and she was excited about it. But I think even more exciting was the reception of the people, of the South Africans, because there was just this buzz with, hey, there's a vendor show, there's a vendor show. I mean, some people in my hometown in Bergville did not even know that there was a language called Venda. But when you look at the strides that we have made, when you look at the significance that it has brought to just minority languages, then you can see that it is not just a journey of Mubango as a soapy, but it is a journey of all of us as a people. 20 years later, I mean, I think we have plus minus 5 million viewers, and that's a major achievement.
Now, Babu Duma, you are not Venda. So how easy or difficult was it for you to promote a Venda film? Because you are not Venda speaking particularly.
But I'm an African. I'm not Venda, but I'm an African. In South Africa, there are 11 language groups. And I come from a culture of the Black consciousness movement in the 70s, where we wanted to say Africans need to be united. It did not matter that you are Sotho, you are Shangaan. And one of the ways that Tina as Africans can achieve unity is for us to acknowledge each other. As much as I'm not Venda, I am born of a Swati mother and a Zulu father. So I'm a United Nations myself. So it was very easy for me, particularly because of my Black consciousness background, to be able to deal with an African language, because Tina, as Africans, we need to acknowledge that. Kuti siyafana, simuntu munye, and we have to be working together. So it was not difficult at all for me.
All right. And when bringing together the cast, what was the criteria and what sort of processes did you guys have to go through in order to select the cast that you have now?
First of all, Sis Musa, we understood that Venda was a minority language, that very few people outside of the Venda themselves spoke isiVenda. So we understood that if we did a Venda show, we would need a device for other South Africans to understand it. So we divided the cast into two. There was a Venda family, then there was a Sotho family. So we were kind of mostly forced to speak both Venda and Sesotho. The challenges with the Venda-speaking groups, there were no actors, there were no known actors about Kulma isiVenda. So we had to go to Thohoyandou, we had to go to various places in the north to look for Venda actors. So I can proudly say that in Mubango, we've basically introduced almost most of the Venda actors that you know. So that was the difficult part. But, you know, it was an incubation, and you could see that the acting at the beginning was a little bit awkward. But now I think we're seeing massively talented Venda actors coming into the fore.
All right. Now, Babu Duma, 20 years into democracy, how have you managed to sustain Mubango? And how do you plan on sustaining it more and moving forward?
We have grown with the times. As the times have progressed, we have also found that we have to bring in other elements to make the show develop. When it started, it was concentrating on the older people. The story was older. A man dies who's married to two women, one in the rural areas, one in the townships. So the story seemed to be focusing on it, but 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, we had to introduce young stories. We had to introduce young people into the mix without necessarily pushing the old people aside. So today, the story is concentrating on Abo Tandaza, Abo Rantumeng, Abo Tuli, Abo Matsidiso, Abo Noni, Abo Gundo in the Venda fraternity, but it is not leaving the older people aside. But we acknowledge that we need to speak to the young people as well. Social issues have come into the fraternity. So we've kept it interesting because we've now moved into younger people. How do we hope to keep it interesting? It's just to tell these massively amazing African stories, South African stories, and mixing both young people and not so young people.
All right, Babu Duma, that is where we'll have to leave it. But thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me, Ngiyabonga kakhulu, and happy 20th anniversary of this freedom of ours.
All right, thank you very much. That was Duma Kandlovu, creator of the South African soapy Mubango. Now, 12 years a slave actress Lupita Nyong'o has been named the People's Magazine's most beautiful person. The Kenyan starred in the film alongside Chiwetel Ejiofor, Michael Fassbender, and Brad Pitt.
Lupita Nyong'o has wowed fashion critics with almost all her red carpet choices during this year's award season. She starred in 2 fashion campaigns, one for Miu Miu, and has been named the face for Lancôme. This week, People magazine declared the Kenyan actress the most beautiful person in the world. Nyong'o received global fame late 2013 when she starred as Patsy in Steve McQueen's 12 Years a Slave, her first feature film and role she received an Oscar for. The People magazine title has only been given to only 3 other women of color since it was launched in 1990. 3 are Halle Berry, Jennifer Lopez, and Beyoncé. This makes Lupita the first dark-skinned woman to be named the most beautiful in the world. Nyong'o was honored with the Best Breakthrough Performance Award at the 7th Annual Essence Magazine's Black Woman Luncheon in Hollywood. There she spoke about how society made people with dark skin feel.
I received a letter from a girl, and I'd like to share just a small part of it with you. Dear Lupita, it reads, I think you're really lucky to be this black, but yet this successful in Hollywood overnight. I was just about to buy Dentsure's Whitenicious cream to lighten my skin when you appeared on the world map and saved me.
Lupita then said she struggled with her own dark skin. She said she prayed to be light, but that never happened until she saw Sudanese supermodel Alec Wack on international fashion stages.
Finally, I realized that beauty was not a thing that I could acquire or consume. It was something that I just had to be. And what my mother meant when she said, you can't eat beauty, was that you can't rely on how you look to sustain you. What actually sustains us, what is fundamentally beautiful, is compassion for yourself and for those around you.
Nyong'o made her acting debut with the short film East River and subsequently starred in the Kenyan television series Sugar. Hollywood is constantly guessing which role she will now accept next. She seems to be taking her time with this. In the meantime, accolades keep on coming.
Thank you.
We'll now go for a quick break, so do stay tuned for more.
Jessica the hippo was found after she was washed down the river shortly after birth. Today, she is a large hippo and still returns for feeding and human interaction.
She also loves body exfoliating. She has a mask as well.
Jessica is the world's most famous hippo, and perhaps she's the only one who has forgotten how aggressive she's supposed to be.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Mandla Mandela has launched the first Nelson Mandela Film Festival. The film festival, named after late political icon, will see international film stars and directors grace Port Elizabeth soil in December 2015. The festival is said to be the biggest film festival in the Southern Hemisphere. The festival inaugural year is intended to celebrate 20 years of democracy and pay tribute to film, entertainment and media legends that have kept South Africa relevant during and post-apartheid. Poet Dr. Maya Angelou, who mourned Madiba's death in her poem His Day Is Done, was honorary global ambassador at the event. Freedom Day is now upon us. We are joined in studio by renowned musician Babusipho Hotsticks Mabuse and dancer Gregory Maqoma, in studio by artists who have been in the entertainment industry since and before the dawn of democracy. Hello and welcome to Afroshowbiz News.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
You're welcome. Now, starting with you, Babusipho, when we think of pre-democracy, we think of musicians like Ubrenda Fassie, Abu Blondie. Now, how has music evolved from those days up until now?
Well, musically, a lot has changed. I think I've always believed that musicians, will make music according to their generation's interests. Mm-hmm. A lot has changed. Young musicians today are more about party music, which is fine because we're celebrating democracy. Whereas, during apartheid, we had to be a voice for the many voiceless people. So through music, we're able to make statements that will conscientize society. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, Gregory, you have a dance company. How do you now use dance to express feelings of freedom? How have you been using that through dance?
Well, I think dance has been playing a vital role in terms of giving a wider society our view of our society. Mm-hmm. It's a reflection, and we it's more than just dreams, because most people think, when you're dancing, it's always about the superficial. But we also make reference to really social issues, and we make reference to them in order to conscientize our society. And also, we're very aware of what is going on around us, and aware of the changes and the cultural context in which we work. So all of that, plays an important role in order for us to make sure that dance is not just, an entity that is striving to be the best in the form of a body, but to be the best in the mind, in the human mind as well.
All right. Now, Babu Sipho, what do you think are some of the difficulties that musicians are facing these days?
I mean, some of the problems that musicians face today have been there before. I mean, but I think a lot has changed. I must admit that performance space is available, freely available. People can perform at venues, whereas during apartheid it was a very difficult era when, I have what I always refer to as the behind the curtain. Where musicians were not allowed to perform at certain venues. They would perform for white people. For instance, you had someone like Percy Sledge, who was essentially a black musician, but a lot of white people loved his music, so he was invited to come to the country to perform. And some of the backup artists came from the townships. And there was a mix of white and colored black musicians. And at the venue, black musicians were not allowed to be on stage with him. He could only be the only one up front, whereas many of the black musicians were performing behind the curtain. And these were some of the experiences. And of course, there were no hotels for musicians to stay at, so we would always be staying at people's houses. And even somewhere along the way, we would always be confronted with police on our way and asking us what kind of work we do. When we told them we were musicians, they could not believe. I mean, music for them, black musicians in particular, were just like scum.
All right. Now, Gregory, did you as dancers face any of these racial divides before?
Well, when I started with a company, I trained at Moving Into Dance, which is a Johannesburg-based dance company. And when I started in the company, there was really a very clear distinction between white and black, but also at the same time we were fortunate that we had a director who wanted to break the barriers between black and white, and so she tried to incorporate all cultures and forms. But as the more that barrier was being broken, then there was really I would say a lot more of white dancers started to actually disappear from the company. And so the company then remained really a black company. So that whole idiom of transformation becomes really something else, and I continue to ask myself, have we really transformed as a country? Can we really come to a point where, both black and white can work in the same space and really appreciate each other?
All right. Now, Babu Sipho, moving on forward, how do we then begin, to engage the youth in music? Do you think enough platforms are offered for them?
No, presently, yes. There's so much space available for young people. It's really up to them to decide whether they want to be spinning discs or they want to make music. So there has to be a clear distinction there. And the most... currently what is happening is that a lot of young musicians aspire to be DJs. So we are no longer teaching, we're not talking about musical interactions and so on. So it's up to them to decide what their space should be. And if they feel that being DJs is the best way to express their interest in music, it's fine. We don't have a problem with that. We are musicians, we'll continue making music according to how we understand and appreciate music.
Of course. Now, Gregory, with you, how do we then begin to engage youngsters also to get involved in dance?
Well, I think we've been doing it as Vienna Dance Company. We have an outreach program which we take into schools. And when we when we hire dancers in our company for training, we also make sure that they go back into their communities and give back. So they have to spend at least one day in a week to work with an adopted community, adopt a school, adopt a project in their own society, and make sure that they also give back to those societies that they work within or they come from. And for me, it is quite important. And, as it is in music as well, those opportunities are there for young people to grow. And we want them to develop and to grow and to also own up these spaces, that we're not creating these spaces for us to just do what we're doing, but we're creating for a future generation to be able to continue to do what we've been doing.
Of course. Now, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it right there, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, you're welcome.
Yes.
You are still watching Afroshowbiz News. If you have missed any of our shows, simply find us on our YouTube channel by simply searching for Afroshowbiz News. Let's go for another ad break. We'll be right back.
Zoom into Africa. This is Gabon. The president is Mr. Ali Ben Bongo. Gabon got independent from France on August 17 in 1960. The population is over 1 million people. One of the major languages spoken is French. Monetary unit is CFA.
And now joining us in studio is curator Bongani Mkonza. Hello and welcome to Afroshowbiz News.
Thank you and welcome. And hello to the viewers at home.
Thank you for coming. Now, Bongani, looking at different artists in the industry, how has democracy been depicted in some of their works?
Well, sure, we've seen a lot of changes in terms of content, mostly. Before 1994, most artists were doing a lot of art with regard to struggle, the conditions of life that were prevalent at the time. But now, if you look at the artworks, they showcasing what the principles of liberation, the enjoyment of democracy, and a whole lot of things. But if you also, before artists used to think, an artwork would change the world. That opportunity to to make an artwork, it was a voice that was very, sacred to the artist. But now, we see a lot of platforms and more artists are not just painting, but they're doing performance art. They're part of the global art scene.
All right. Now, since democracy, has the arts in any way attracted youngsters in the country?
A lot, yes, a lot. Actually, we should commend the, the changes that has been happening, the platforms that have been happening. I heard Baba Hostik Mabusa talking about platforms before. To exhibit in a legitimate art gallery, it was not an easy thing. Artists didn't have a platform, didn't have a space, didn't have a voice. And you were sort of curated into what you should talk about, and it was censored. A lot of censorship was happening. But now, you can critique, you can use your art as a social commentary. You can go into wider issues that, were kind of taboo or not spoken about before.
Now, speaking of platforms, why do you think these platforms are important for each and every artist in the country?
Okay. It's art galleries, I think, and different platforms. Art is not only about being showcased in the gallery. The fact that we have this show here and we're talking about the art, we see artists now being invited to global art scenes like the biennales. So all of those are platforms. The Department of Arts and Culture has really made huge strides in terms of exposing our talents, and but also and the nation itself. You know, the growing of the markets, the art markets, the buyers, the collectors. We are seeing a lot of black collectors, which was not heard of before. You know, the increase of the the budgets in the middle class. So it's quite a lot, because art is not only about art making, it's also about who's consuming the arts, you know, for what reasons, you know, what is allowed, what is not allowed. All of those are platforms, I guess.
All right, now it's Freedom Day tomorrow. What are some of the things you have been involved in that depict freedom in South Africa?
Yeah, it's actually we should maybe define freedom. Like, is freedom just a once-off event, or is it a right? Is it, you know? Because I mean, artists have been critiquing and commenting and you know, talking about issues of freedom for a long time. You know, they were one of the pioneers before of freedom. They were, Jurassic Sekotos of the time. You know, some the Tumile Fenis. They had to leave the country because of the censorship, and they had to go to exile because of the issues of freedom that they were talking about. So it depends also on the perspective, because some of the artists are looking at freedom from a different perspective, from celebrating the freedom. Some of the artists are looking at freedom from critiquing the freedom. Are we free? You know, they're asking questions. I guess, as we say, art is not about giving answers.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you there because time is up. But thank you so much for joining us on the show, Bongani.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. The not-to-be-missed event, MTV Africa Music Awards, will be held in Durban, South Africa on Saturday, June 7th, 2014.
The continent stars are coming out to play in Durban this year. The city is often called South Africa's playground and often lives up to that name with hot weather all year round.
Someone get these girls off of me. We rock the bar, baby girl, round 3 now. Let's go get some shots. Drink up, cause you know the party don't stop.
Tied top of the nominee list this year is South African artist Mafikizolo and Uhuru and Nigerian musician Davido. They all received 4 nominations each. Closely behind them with 3 nominations are Nigeria's P-Square, Angola's Yuri Dakuna and South Africa's Mikasa. Only Nigerian and South African musicians have been nominated in the coveted Artist of the Year category. They are Davido, Mafikizolo, Mikasa, P-Square and Uhuru. Then there's the equally fiercely contested Song of the Year category. It has 10 nominees. Vying for the best song in Africa are Davido for Skeleu, DJ Clock featuring Bittenberg with Pluto, there's DJ Ganyani with Shigupu, DJ Kent and the Arrows, Spin My World Around. They'll all be making Durban a truly African dance floor on the 7th of June. Altogether, the Mamas have musicians from 13 African countries, despite the usual South Africa and Nigerian dominance. Good luck to all the nominees.
We have now come to the end of our show, but be sure to catch our repeats every Sunday at 2 a.m. and again at 1:30 p.m. From me and the team, it's thank you and goodbye.
Jessica the hippo was found after she was washed down the river shortly after birth. Today, she is a large hippo and still returns for feeding and human interaction.
She also loves body exfoliating. She has a mask as well.
Jessica is the world's most famous hippo, and perhaps she's the only one who has forgotten how aggressive she's supposed to be.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that educates you about your rights and recourse to those violated. My name is Dumile Mates.
I, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, do hereby swear to be faithful to the Republic of South Africa. So help me God.
In democratic South Africa, people's lives have been transformed and human rights are increasingly being realized. Very often, South Africans now take political rights, including freedom of speech and assembly, for granted. Apartheid and its constraints on freedom of movement, belief and human dignity for most are now painful memories, but no longer the events of today. Rights to more tangible goods, however, shelter, education and health care are more often seen as partially fulfilled needs. They also take their political rights and socio-economic rights as givens, but incomplete realization means they still expect more from the government. The poor quality of services and the unfulfilled promises of job creations are just some of them. South Africa generally has a good story to tell. Today, Rights and Recourse, we examine this statement and many others as we celebrate 20 years of democracy. But before we get into the discussion, let us take a look at this insert.
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. My body has frozen in our frosts and in our latter-day snows. It has thawed in the warmth of our sunshine and melted in the heat of the midday sun. The crack and the rumble of the summer thunders, lashed by startling lightning, have been a cause both of trembling and of hope. The fragrances of nature have been as pleasant to us as the sight of the wild blooms of the citizens of the veldt. The dramatic shapes of the Drakensberg, the soil-colored waters of the Liqua, Iqili, Notugel, and the sands of the Kalahari have all been panels of the set on the natural stage on which we act out the foolish deeds of the theater of the day. At times, and in fear, I have wondered whether I should concede equal citizenship of our country to the leopard and the lion, the elephant and the springbok, the hyena, the black mamba, and the pestilential mosquito.